We mentioned, you can't warm up your breakfast maybe with philosophy, and so it's this sense of what can philosophy do for me, and I, you and I would say that's really the wrong question. Something's pragmatic utility we might call isn't
Yes,
necessarily a measure of its value, but
exactly.
just assuming that um, that we don't correct the questioner when they might would ask us that. We you and I would say, just having read and studied, that philosophy can do a lot of different things.
Oh,
Maybe
absolutely.
would you be willing to maybe just expound on some of the absolutely fundamental and critical and necessary and invaluable things that philosophy, and almost only philosophy, can do for us?
Yes, yes. And to your point about, when people are kind of locked in this, what utility does it have? What practicality
Right.
does it have? If someone doesn't know what a car engine is, they know what a car is and they drive
Right.
their car to work and to the grocery store or whatever. But if they don't know what a car is and you just pulled out a push rod or rocker arm and just said, "What good is this?" They'd probably go, "I don't know. I mean, it just looks like a piece of metal that I can't
Right.
imagine what it could do. Maybe a good paperweight or something," because they don't see how it fits
Mm-hmm.
into a
Mm-hmm.
bigger context,
Right.
which ultimately is eminently practical, right? So I think there's a sense in which philosophy do that. So, for example, probably the most critical one that we could put our finger on is the whole issue of what is truth.
Right.
Because as Christians, we say, well, we believe the Bible is true, we believe Christianity is true. And I'm old enough to remember a time in the US, and I keep making these international references because the internet, I mean, we got a lot of viewers, don't we, all over the world. And it may not be exactly the same in some other countries, but in the US, I'm old enough to remember a time where if you said to someone, well, I believe the Bible is true, they knew what you meant, even if they
Right.
didn't agree with you. They would
Right.
say, well, I don't believe it is true. I don't believe, I don't. They would know what everybody meant by the categories.
Mm-hmm.
Today, you can't bank on the fact that someone's even going to know what you mean. So when you say to some people, I believe the Bible is true, that will sound to them like, I think asparagus tastes good.
Right.
And they're happy for you if you like asparagus. They might like another vegetable more. They might not like asparagus, but they would never feel compelled to disabuse you of your affection for your asparagus, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
true for you and not for me, kind of stuff. And you go, okay, well, lots of things are true for one and not for another in terms of does asparagus taste good? That's true for me. Does Brussels sprouts, do they taste good? That's not true for me, right? So, so philosophy then has, if you just go, okay, so what are we saying about something when we say that it's true? Well, whatever that is, that's a philosophical conversation from that point
Right.
forward. And when I say, well, the question of what is truth is a philosophical question, it doesn't make sense for someone to protest. Like a Richard Dawkins, for example, might be one who would protest and try to say, no, in fact, he does do this with the question of God's existence. Whether God exists or not is a strictly a scientific question. And I just go, but that's like saying hunting for seashells on the seashore is strictly a metal detector question. That's what he's doing. He's got a metal detector on the beach looking for seashells and doesn't realize his equipment is ill conceived to detect calcium carbonate. It only detects metal. So
Right.
by parallel, there are certain, uh, as we said, content. We would argue content. Certainly methods, protocols, and logic and such that is integral to the philosophical undertaking. That is essential to deal with certain questions. That when you try to force it into a different kind of question, you're doing violence to the very reality you're trying to understand. You can't understand seashells with a metal detector. You have to have some other means of understanding. When it comes to these questions like truth that we've already brought up and the existence of God, there are certain elements of the discipline of philosophy that that we give the name philosophy to doing those particular elements and methods and stuff. That's why we call it philosophy. So truth is one.